Hey y'all, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Holly and this is my booktube channel. I feel like it's been a minute since I've sat down and done a proper video. It's been vlogs lately and this is just a crazy time of month for me. I don't know about y'all, but there's lots of graduations and different things going on. It's just been crazy lately. So it is nice to just sit down with a cup of coffee and talk to y'all about books. Today's video, we're going to be talking May wrap-ups. So all of the books that I read in May and my thoughts on each. So get you a cup of coffee, cup of tea, whatever it is you're drinking, and let's get into it. So in no particular order, the first book I have for you is Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. If you have been here a minute, you may have noticed that I recently started the Throne of Glass series after seeing so many people talk about it. I had to figure out what the hype was all about, and it did not take long before I realized what it was about. I just love it. If you're familiar with it, or even if you're not, you may have heard that it is obviously a fantasy, and essentially it's about this assassin, and I don't want to go too much into the second book because it will ruin the first book, but essentially it's about this assassin, and she goes from being in like a salt mine prison to competing to be the king's champion in order to win her freedom. And there's just a ton of stuff that goes on with that along the way. A lot of different mysteries you're finding out about all the characters and who she is and what she's about. And there's even some romance sprinkled in. So if you're not a huge romance reader, this might still work for you because it's not overly romance. It's more of a subplot to the main fantasy, which I appreciate because romance can be a little hard for me to get into, but I gave this one 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I cannot wait to pick up book number 3, and hopefully I can do that sometime in June. Next up, at the very beginning of May, I participated in the Bookathon Readathon. So it was a readathon where you read spooky middle grade books for, I think it was like an entire week. And I intended to read like 3 or 4 books, but I only got around to 2, and they were actually by the same author, and that is Lindsay Curry. This one is What Lives in the Woods. I think this is her latest release. And the other one was called Scritch Scratch. I checked it out from the library, so I don't have it anymore, but I'll make sure to pop it up here on the screen somewhere. But these books were fantastic. I was a little skeptical going into it because middle grade is just that. Middle grade. It's targeted for kids, and I was afraid it would be a little cheesy and juvenile, but it really wasn't. Like, I was very invested in the story and I wanted to figure out what was going on, and I think if you were a fan of Mary Downing Hahn as a kid, you might really love these because those are the vibes I got from these books. I gave them both 5 stars, just not because they are this spectacular, amazing, complicated piece of literature, but because for a middle grade book, I felt like it was a 5-star book. If I was a kid and even as an adult, I really enjoyed it. So I'd highly recommend them. They're both very different stories, but kind of similar. I've noticed a theme with Lindsay Curry. She typically has her characters set in like the Chicago area, and she weaves in a lot of historical context and facts, and I love that. So in Scritch Scratch, she, meaning the main character, I cannot remember her name right now, and I don't have the book with me, but she is, I think, maybe 12, 13. These are all kind of like 5th, 6th graders, I think is what you would maybe call them. And her dad runs a ghost tour bus around Chicago. So they visit all the haunted sites, and he tells the ghost stories that supposedly linger in the area. And she just thinks it's a bunch of nonsense and that it's super embarrassing, and she doesn't want any of her friends to know that one night she has to go help her dad on this bus because his main assistant couldn't be there. But while she's on the bus helping her dad one night, she notices a child at the back of the bus, and she starts hearing some weird like scritch scratch noise, hence the title, and she thinks, oh no, someone left their kid on the bus. But then she turns back around to go help him, and he's no longer there, yet he seems to keep appearing everywhere she goes. So she starts getting really freaked out, starts thinking, oh my gosh, there might be something to these ghost stories that my dad's always talking about. And the whole mystery unravels from there, and I won't say much more, but it was a great read. I really enjoyed it, and I'd recommend it for any age. And of course, What Lives in the Woods was the buddy read, actually, for the Bookathon. So we all read this book together, and it was another awesome Lindsay Curry read. The main character in this one is also maybe around the age of 12, and she is really looking forward to summertime because she wants to be a writer. She loves Agatha Christie, and she wants to be a famous mystery writer, so she has signed up for a summer writing workshop. But her plans get derailed when her dad announces that they are going to spend the summer at this old haunted house that he is supposed to restore. He's like a historical restoration expert. So of course, 12-year-old would be completely bummed that they have to stay in this boring house and listen to their dad do work all summer. But she quickly finds out that it's not exactly boring at all. Weird, creepy, haunting things start happening in this house, and she and her brother go about trying to figure out what is going on and how they can make the haunting stop in order to save her dad's job, because no one would want to come to this house, right, if there was really something haunted in it. So another 5-star read by Lindsay Curry, and I highly recommend you read this one as well. Next up, I read a book that's been on my TBR for years. I don't know why it's taken me so long to get to it, but I just hadn't picked it up until this month, and that is The Lying Game by Ruth Ware. This one, I think, came out, oh gosh, maybe 2017, 2018, somewhere around there, I think. So it's been out for a while, and it was a Reese's book club pick. And I actually gave this one 3 stars, you know, so kind of middle of the road for me. Not a 5-star, just wowed me, you know, not really a 4-star where I was like, wow, pretty good, but maybe this could have been better. It was just a 3-star. It was kind of middle of the road. It didn't really wow me. I thought the twists and turns were super predictable. If you're unfamiliar with this book, it centers around this group of women who, when they were back in high school, they all attended the same boarding school, and they had this game that they played called The Lying Game. And basically the object of the game was to see how many lies you could get away with. And they had a system of points where you would essentially gain points based on how well your lie worked, I guess. So already off the bat, not a very likable main character or characters if you count the whole group of women. They're just rotten. Like, who comes up with a game like that? And their lies were not very, like, kind or funny. Like, they were mean-spirited. So it was really hard for me to get behind them or to feel any sort of sympathy for them, because in this book, they all meet up again because one of the women in the group texts all of them and says, hey, I need you. And so they all rush to see what it is, and they all meet up at this beach house. To even meet up at this beach house, they all have to concoct some lie as to where they're even going. They can't even be honest about meeting up for this thing. I did appreciate that there was a theme in the book about kind of exploring how a person's views on things can change depending on the stage of life that you're in. I thought it really explored that well, and maybe that was kind of the whole point of the book, is you get insight into the way these women thought about things when they were teenagers versus how they think about it now that their lives are very different. And this whole mystery really starts to unravel because one of the main things that has happened to them, which this was another one of my beefs with this book, is you don't really figure out what happened until a good ways into the book. So you're aware something really bad happened to them when they were in high school, just based off some of the hints and clues you're getting, but you're not really sure what it is until about 180 pages in. And I don't want to spoil it, so just know that something like bad happened to them, but there was still some really mysterious circumstances surrounding it, and you don't know fully what it is until about 180 to 200 pages in. So it's a very slow burn type of thing, and you're not really sure if you can trust the narrator because their whole thing is lying, right? I will say, the descriptions and the writing is very vivid. Like, I could picture everything happening in my mind, so I did love that. I think I would have given it 4 stars if the twists hadn't been so predictable, but because I saw it coming a mile away, I thought, you know, that knocks it down a star for me. You have to surprise me to get that star. There was also just a lot of toxic relationships, and that is hard for me to read. I just don't enjoy reading about toxic romances, toxic friendships, any of that. And there was a very, I'll just say, uncomfortable step-sibling relationship that happens in this book, and it still creeps me out thinking about it. If you've read it, maybe you know what I'm talking about. I won't spoil it for those of you that haven't, but there's an interesting, uncomfortable relationship there. But yeah, I think those are my main thoughts on this book. Let me know if you've read it and what you thought about it. I personally gave it 3 stars for all the reasons I just mentioned. I think it's worth reading because you may disagree with me. You may not find it predictable. You may not find the characters unlikable. I don't know. Check it out and see. There you have it. That is The Lying Game by Ruth Ware. Next up is a book that I read for one of the book clubs that I'm in, and that is Faith's Reading Things book club. I don't know if she's going to be doing the book club next month. I think she might be taking a break from her Patreon, but for this month we read Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. I think this came out not too long ago, and I thought it was really good. I gave it 4 stars. So essentially you're following the main character, Chloe, and she is now a psychologist. So she's a grown woman, probably about my age, I think. I'm 31 and I think she's around the same age. And she is now a psychologist and she has her own practice, and she's set to be married in a few months to her fiance, Daniel, and he is like a pharmaceutical sales rep, so obviously very successful as well, and he's just seemingly perfect, and she's just really loving her life. However, Chloe has a dark secret. Her father, back when she was like 13, was arrested and imprisoned for life for the disappearance and murder of 6 teenage girls. And I promise that's not a spoiler, it is on the back. So Chloe's obviously done a lot in life to try to escape her past and forget about all the horrible things that happened that summer. But this summer, the present day, 2 teenage girls go missing, and the pattern of the way they go missing starts to be eerily familiar to her. It's starting to look exactly like the way her dad murdered the 6 teenagers all those years ago. And she's of course thinking, how can this be possible? He's locked up in prison. What is going on here? Could this be a copycat serial killer? I don't know. And you know me, I love anything with serial killer tropes. That's like one of my favorite things. So I can't say a whole lot more than that without spoiling it, but I will say that I really did enjoy it. The only thing that kind of irked me was that I found it predictable. The twist, I guess I'll just call it the twist, because if I describe it more than that, it'll give it away. But I marked the page as I was reading, I marked the page with my prediction of what was going to happen or what had happened. And I think it was page 92. And it was at that point in the book where I was like, I bet this is what happened. And 92 pages is not very far in. This is a almost 400-page thriller. So 90 pages in, to be able to figure it out that fast, I feel like the author could have done a little bit better at hiding it. It was glaringly obvious to me, but it was still really enjoyable because I wanted to find out if I was correct. And there were twists that I didn't see coming, so I was like, whoa, I did not anticipate that happening. So it was still really fun. That's why it got 4 stars. It wasn't so predictable that it put me off like The Lying Game. This one was really good. I loved the main character. She's kind of an unreliable narrator because she has had all this childhood trauma, right? And so she's developed some really unhealthy coping mechanisms, and so you're not really sure if you can trust what she's thinking or feeling, but you get this sense that she's not crazy. She might be damaged, but she's not crazy. And I hate to use the word damaged because that sounds so negative. She's just had a lot of trauma. So I shouldn't say damaged. That's not very nice. We'll just say she's had a lot of trauma that she has tried to work through, and some of her coping mechanisms are not healthy. So she's therefore an unreliable narrator, but that kind of makes the story a little more fun. Like I said, I love love thrillers that have a serial killer aspect to them, and I really enjoyed it, and I had a lot of fun talking in the Patreon group chat with Faith's Reading Things and everybody about the book. Everyone kind of had the same thought as far as the ending. And what I mean by that is everyone thought that the way the author ended the book was just so unsatisfying. There were so many loose ends that were not tied up, and it wasn't in a good way where you're left on a slight cliffhanger and you're like, wow, I just can't imagine what is going to happen next in this person's life. There were some things happened, and I can't say much other than that, but some things happened and then the book ended and you're thinking, wait, what? Why didn't that happen? And why didn't these two people, everyone had so many questions left unanswered. And I think it was to the point where it was a bad thing. It wasn't like a good cliffhanger. It was a bad cliffhanger. So I think all of that really irked some people because the author spent the entire book building up certain relationships, and then the way it ended just left you feeling like, wait, what? So that's the only way I can describe it without spoiling it. But if you've read it, maybe you know what I'm talking about. So comment below how you felt about that, if you've read it, or what your thoughts were. And if you haven't read it, I still highly recommend it. It was really enjoyable. So there you have it. That is A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. Oh, this next book, this is one of my favorites that I read this month, and that is Falling by TJ Newman. First of all, the cover is just super cool. I love the colors, I love the plane. It's just, oof, that it could easily be a cover buy. But even if you bought it just for the cover, you would not be disappointed by the contents. I gave this 5 freaking stars. If I could give it more, I absolutely would. It was so, so good. I read it largely in part because I heard her second book called Drowning comes out later this month. In fact, today's Memorial Day, and I think Drowning comes out tomorrow, so that'll be exciting. So one thing to note about the author, TJ Newman, is she is a flight attendant, and she has been for many, many years. So everything she talks about in this book is based on, you know, truth and facts and probably a lot of her personal experience. This takes place in a post 9/11 world. So after all the crazy security measures have been implemented, all of the regulations that we're familiar with, all the TSA screenings, everything, right? So you would think that would be foolproof. Well, not in this book. So the premise is the back, I love the way the back approached introducing this book. The back kind of invites you to imagine that you are on this plane with 144 other souls on board. However, what you don't know is that 30 minutes before the flight took off, the captain's family was kidnapped. And the kidnappers are telling the captain, if you don't crash this plane, your family dies. So the captain is caught in this horrible situation, not knowing what to do, thousands of feet in the air with 140 something souls on board. What an impossible situation, right? What I love about this is that the captain and the flight attendant have a really special bond. They've flown tons of flights together, their families know each other, they're just longtime friends. And so even though the kidnappers have instructed him not to say anything, this isn't a spoiler, this happens pretty early on. He does entrust one of the flight attendants and let her know what's going on because he feels like, I can't do this alone. If anyone's going to be able to help me, it's going to be her. And everything ensues from there. And the back of the book says, enjoy the flight. And it's just so heart-pounding. I finished it in a matter of hours. I mean, you have to know what happens, and it is no secret to me why this is going to be turned into a movie. It's going to be fantastic. I cannot wait till the movie comes out. I won't say too much more because it'll spoil it, but if you've read it, you probably love it. If you haven't, read it, you're gonna love it. That is Falling by TJ Newman. Next up, I have a book that was a soft DNF for me. I say soft DNF because I'm not sure I want to totally give up on it yet, but I did put it down. That is While Justice Sleeps by Stacey Abrams. I wanted to love this book so badly because I admire Stacey Abrams and who she is as an attorney and as a politician. I'm not affiliated with any political party, so I'm not even going to go there. I just admire her as a woman, as a groundbreaker, as an attorney, as a brilliant individual. And this book was her first thriller, I think. I think she's written some romance books actually, but I think this is one of her first thrillers, and it is a legal thriller because your main character is this attorney who is clerking for one of the United States Supreme Court justices. And what's important about this justice is that a big decision is going to be made, and he's one of the swing votes. Sorry if you can tell my camera shifted. My dog keeps laying on it and moving it, and it's driving me crazy. So if it shifts a couple times, it's because I'm trying to get him to stop moving. Anyway, while Justice sleeps, like I said, the United States Supreme Court Justice, he is the swing vote, and he ends up in this coma and unable to be the swing vote. But if you know anything about the United States Supreme Court, is they pretty much have lifetime appointments. So unless he dies, no one can make a decision on any issue. Like, you basically have to wait for him to come out of it or die. So what's important about the law clerk that works for him is that after he goes into this coma, she finds out that she's been named his power of attorney and guardian. So she has to make these life-altering decisions about her boss. And there's all these aspects of like conspiracy theories and all this crazy stuff and corruption that's going on within the government. And it's really awesome. And I was loving the first half. I think you can tell there I got about, let's see, 262 pages in. So I got pretty far in, but I think what started bothering me is that the author goes into these really dense topics, and it's not that I don't understand what she's saying. It's not fun to read. It kind of slows everything down, and it's making me wonder if she's just trying to show how intelligent she is, which she really doesn't need to do because we know, we get it, she's brilliant. It goes into like different chess topics and science topics, and I like some of that, but it's so much of the book and it's so heavy in here that I really had a hard time maintaining interest. And that's why it's kind of a soft DNF, because a lot of people really loved it. And I want to push through because I really want to see what happens with the main character and the Supreme Court justice and all of that. I'm struggling to wade through the deep, dense topics. Some of it is just not necessary, I guess. So I know she's got a second book out. I think it just came out earlier this month. I think it's called Rogue Justice or something like that. So I'm curious enough to see if I can get through this and maybe enjoy the second book. But for now, it's kind of a soft DNF because they just started to get into so many like computer topics and chess topics, and I was like, oh my goodness, just get to the good stuff. Where's the conspiracy and the government stuff? And I don't know, I was just getting a little annoyed with it, so I put it down before I could hate it, and maybe I'll pick it up again later. If you've read it, let me know what you thought of it and whether it's worth it to push through or whether I should just put it down. There you have it. That is While Justice Sleeps by Stacey Abrams. And last but certainly not least, I have a book that I'm still hoping to finish before the end of the month. I'm filming this on Memorial Day, and it should go out Memorial Day if I can work that fast. But I'm hoping to finish this before June 1st because I'm already, I think, about halfway through. I'm already roughly 250 pages in. So I'm hoping I can finish it, and that's why I wanted to mention it in my May wrap-ups, and that is Fairy Tale by Stephen King. I finally got to it. I am not finished. I think you can see there kind of halfway through, and so far it is fantastic, y'all. He did a great job with this one. He wrote it during 2020, so in the COVID years, and he said that he really just wanted to write about something that made him happy. So typical Stephen King writing is the horror genre, right? That's kind of what he's famous for, that's what he's good at. And this was a totally different genre. I feel like it's more in the fantasy genre, and you're not even really sure how it's fantasy until a good ways into the book, but stick with it. Trust me, hang in there until the fantasy stuff hits. It's worth it, and even getting up to that part is so fun. It's such a heartwarming story. It's really, really good. It's so different than what Stephen King has written before, but it's still very Stephen King, if that makes sense. So it's a very different genre, but still you can see classic Stephen King writing characteristics and descriptions and things of that nature. So even if you think to yourself, I don't like fantasy, I like horror and I want to stick to that, check this out, try it out. I think you're going to love it. Just a brief synopsis. You've got Charlie, who is this guy here. He's like a 17-year-old kid, and Radar, the German shepherd that he kind of befriends. And essentially the story is that Charlie grows up as a pretty normal kid. However, his mother dies in like a tragic car accident, so his dad is left to raise him, and he and his dad go through some rough patches. And I won't say a ton more than that, but there is something that happens during those rough patches that leads Charlie to feel like, how do I say it without spoiling it? That leads him to feel like he has some atoning to do. I'll just put it that way. And eventually, when he's 17, he ends up helping out this elderly guy who is like the standard get off my lawn guy. You know what I'm talking about? He's the old crotchety man living in this creepy haunted looking house, and he's always yelling at kids to get away from his yard, and just the neighborhood crank, you know? And one day he stumbles upon this guy's house, I guess, or he's going down the street, I think it is, and he hears the dog barking, Radar, and he goes to investigate, and he finds out that the crotchety old man has fallen and hurt himself. So I won't say much more than that, other than the fact that Charlie ends up helping him, and they end up forming this kind of bond and friendship. I'll just say that much. And from that friendship comes just a ton of crazy stuff. And I'm not fully done with the book yet, so I can't comment on everything, but this is just sort of the first half, as you can see there. So far, it is amazing. I love it. I'm probably going to finish it before the month is up. Either way, maybe I'll mention it in like my June wrap-ups just to give you a more thorough review, but I love it. I would highly recommend it, and I'm not even done with it. So there you have it. That is Fairy Tale by Stephen King. Well, there you have it. That about wraps up all the books that I read in May. Let me know if you've read any of these and what you thought of them, or what did you read this month? Was it a good reading month, or did you have a lot of flops? Let me know that as well. I can't wait to see y'all in my next video, my June TBR, so you'll be able to check out what I plan to read in the month of June, and I will see you in that video. Bye y'all.